So good evening and welcome everyone. We will not have any special presentation for adjusting the motivation, but as we recite the verse for refuge, please adjust your motivation according to bodhicitta. So we are at the point of presenting now the root afflictions, and from that we will continue to the proximate afflictions. So it's important to understand the root afflictions, the first group, the 6 root afflictions. They're called root afflictions because they are the root that generate all other afflictions. However, before we go into a presentation of the root or the proximate afflictions and so forth, it is important to understand what is an affliction. We talk about affliction, isn't it? So affliction is a mistaken mind, such as, for example, attachment. And it's a mistaken mind that in whoever's mind is generated, it makes that person unhappy, unwell. It wastes our mind, isn't it? So if, for example, attachment is generated in someone's continuum, it makes the person unhappy, unwell. It wastes a lot of things. So this is, once you understand, this is what an affliction is. Affliction is that which wastes me. It makes me unhappy. It makes me unwell. So having understood what affliction is, we can now start talking about the root and the proximate afflictions. So first of all, we have already mentioned the root, the group of the root afflictions. There are 6 of them: attachment, anger, pride, and then we have afflicted ignorance, afflicted doubt, afflicted view. Okay, so they're called root afflictions because they are the root that generate other afflictions. In other words, they induce, they invite other afflictions. Other afflictions come close to them, and other afflictions, we can say they belong in those general categories of the root afflictions. So we start with the first one, attachment. So what is attachment? Attachment is attraction to a specific focal object, such as your body, your enjoyments, and other possessions, right? And the thing is that attachment is, when you have attachment for a particular object, you do not have the wish to be separated from that object. So you want to remain close, you want to remain together, you want to remain nearby so that you can experience, you can touch, you can reach that object. So attachment is that thought that says, I don't want to be separated from whatever is the focal object. Okay, so to give you an example, we talk here about attachment, and we say attachment comes with this wish not to be separated from that object. You see that with the people that you consider to be very near to you, so it could be close family, close friends, your parents, and so forth, you have a very strong attachment, and you have the very strong wish, a very strong wish not to be separated from these people. Why is the wish so strong? It's so strong because you have attachment. Similarly, we see it with various objects that we consider to be very beautiful, very valuable, objects that are important for us. So Geshe came up here with the example, let's say that you had a few bars of gold, 5 kg of solid gold. If you were to lose this valuable item, your disappointment would be so strong. You will be very sad, you will be very sorry. Why is the disappointment so strong? The disappointment is so strong because you're grasping at that object, you are longing for that object very strongly. And why do you grasp and long for that object so strongly? Is because you have very strong attachment for that particular object. So the more attachment we have, the more craving we have, the more longing we have, the stronger the wish not to be separated. And if we become separated, the biggest the disappointment. There are people who have lost a valuable item, and you can see they become mentally deranged. People become crazy from the disappointment, the anxiety of having lost the item. So attachment is something that is always with us from the moment we open up our eyes in the morning until the time that we fall asleep at night. We remain with attachment. Attachment has become our closest friend, and for that reason is very difficult to push away, to separate from attachment. The example that they give in the text is that attachment is like oil that penetrates cloth, whilst the other afflictions are like dust on your clothes. Dust on your clothes is not very easy to get rid of. It's not very difficult to get rid of. You can shake it, you can rinse it, you get rid of dust. But the oil actually penetrates, goes very deep, and it binds with the material. So this is what attachment does. It mixes and binds with us, with our mind stream. So actually, attachment is the thing that binds us to cyclic existence. And due to that type of bondage, we are not able to break free, to escape from cyclic existence. So the thing that binds us to the prison of cyclic existence is attachment. Because of this, we cannot reverse any longing for cyclic existence. Actually, the opposite. It acts the opposite way. Once you have attachment, it increases your longing for cyclic existence. And the more you long for that cyclic existence, the more impossible it becomes for you to escape from it. You're not even thinking of leaving it behind. A good example for that is our own bodies. The bodies that are these appropriated, contaminated aggregates, right? We actually have an incredible amount of attachment for these bodies. And this is why we consider them to be so precious, so important. And this is why we fuss so much about the body. The body should not become old. The body should not become dirty. The body should not become tired. The body should not experience any cold. The body should not experience any heat. There is this constant, fussing about the body, right? It shows, it's a very good indication of how much attachment we have. And this is attachment for samsara. And this makes it impossible for us, very difficult to escape samsara. Yeah. So because of this nature of attachment, it is actually very difficult to completely eradicate it from the root along with its cause and so forth. However, there are different means and meditations that can help us minimize or reduce attachment as it is generated. So a very good example in terms of attachment for the body, we can meditate on the body as going through the different stages of decomposition. So if you have ever bought meat and left it outside the fridge, you notice how the color of that meat changes. So it goes, from pink to darker red, then it becomes bluish, darker color, then smelly, and so forth. So this is a type of meditation that we can do in relation to our own body. Another meditation we can do is to enumerate all the unclean substances that are within the body, that make up the body. They say that there is a list of 36 unclean substances. So things such as, for example, urine and mucus and brain matter and what is within your intestines and so on and so forth. All right. So there, and pus and blood and lymph and things like that. So you can meditate on all those substances or see the body as just being a collection of these unclean substances in terms of your own body or in terms of the body of another person if you have attachment for this person. So this type of meditation can help us temporarily suppress attachment, reduce it somehow. However, the ultimate goal is to completely eradicate it from the root, because this is the thing that binds us in samsara. In Lamrim Chenmo, there is a comment about attachment and says attachment is mistaken in terms of the focal object. So, or it's wrong in terms of the focal object. And that means that we're talking about the type of mind that is mistaken. So how is it mistaken? It is mistaken because here with attachment, we have inappropriate attention, and inappropriate attention greatly exaggerates the features of the object. So let's say, it might have some features of being nice, but through inappropriate attention, you exaggerate and you think that this object is the most beautiful object that exists. This is what we mean. So in this way, you take the focal object and you distort it, right? So it distorts the focal object, and therefore, because the focal object is not the way that you perceive it, you are dealing here with a mistaken mind. And we don't need to have mistaken minds. What we want to cultivate is unmistaken minds. We come to the second one. The second one is anger. Anger is a malevolent attitude that wishes to cause harm. All right. So we have already mentioned a bit of the etymology of the term anger. In Tibetan is control. So the first syllable kong indicates from the depth, from within. So we know that anger comes from within, from inside. Okay, so it's important to understand the role of anger here, because anger destroys root of virtue that we have created, even going, many lifetimes back. As the Bodhisattva's way of life says, there is no negativity like anger. There is no virtue like patience. So the first line that says there's no negativity like anger, it means that anger is actually the worst. It's absolutely the worst. Why is it the worst? It's the worst because exactly of this function it has that destroys our root of virtue. Even one moment of anger has the power to destroy root of virtue that we have created over hundreds of eons. So here we are every day making the effort to create virtue. So, for example, we make offerings, we make prostrations, we recite Om Mani Padme Hum, we engage, we make our prayers and so forth. We do different practices. All of this generates root of virtue. However, we also become angry, and that anger destroys the root of virtue. So the important thing to understand is that the time of death, the only thing that we can take with us is virtue and non-virtue. And we arrive at the time of death virtually empty-handed in terms of virtue. Why? Because anger has destroyed all our root of virtue. So all we're left with is non-virtue. So we arrive at the time of death with non-virtue, and where will that lead us? This can only lead us into the lower migrations. So consider this and decide decisively that anger is a great fault, anger is very bad, and keep this in mind so that you can try to stop yourself from becoming angry. So also in entering the middle way, it says, sorry, I'm about to sneeze. Okay, anger destroys all your virtue. It leads you to unholy places. It makes you ugly in this life and carries ugliness in the future life as well. It is not something that is praised by the holy beings. So it begins, first of all, by saying that it destroys the root of virtue straight away. And then it says it leads you to unholy places. Unholy places here refers to the 3 lower migrations. It makes you angry in this life because we know how anger distorts our face. Our face becomes red and our characteristics become unpleasant. The whole face is distorted. But then again, this is something that will follow us in the future. And obviously, there is no holy being who speaks highly of anger, isn't it? So all of these are faults of anger that we need to remind ourselves when we are about to become angry. So before we actually become angry, we have an opportunity to stop or suppress anger from arising. Once anger arises, it is too late. Then we are carried over by that anger. It is due to anger that, for example, we kill others or we harm others. It is due to anger that we ourselves become unhappy. And of course, there's no question that those who are around us are affected and become unhappy when we become angry, isn't it? So there are so many faults of anger, there's no way we could enumerate them all, but just bring those into mind. So it's very important to consider how we can deal with anger. Think about the antidotes of anger. Think about the great benefits of practicing patience, and think about all the faults of anger. To give you an example, they say that when you make a prostration, so let's give an example here of the full prostration, the number of atoms on the earth that you cover with the length of your body. All right, so whatever is that number of atoms, so which obviously it's a very large number, so because you think your entire body once you stretch out, right? So you cover a lot of earth under that. So by prostrating, you create the merit to be reborn as a universal monarch. How many times? Multiplied by the number of atoms that your body covers when you prostrate. And you hear that. And then, of course, the question comes, there are many people who prostrate. And every time you prostrate, you cover so much ground. So that's a lot of atoms there. So how comes we don't see many more universal monarchs around? And the answer to that is because you create that much virtue, but you destroy it with anger. So think about anger. Anger is very dangerous. And because it is very dangerous, we have to be very careful. We come to the next one, number 3 in the list is pride. So pride is the attitude, a conceited attitude that considers whatever you have to be excelling what others have. And in this way, you generate haughtiness. So you consider yourself to be higher than others, better than others. So to give you an example, you would be saying, my lineage, my family lineage is superior to that of others, or my body is so much better than that of others. Even if you're taller, that becomes a cause of pride, like I am taller than others, or your possessions, I have more or better possessions than others. Even when you are ordained, you can take pride thinking my ethics are better than the ethics of others. Even if you are the the chant leader, my voice is better than others. Or if you are a singer, again, you think, my voice, I have better voice than others, and so forth. So really you think that you are excelling. You are above and beyond. So there is that sense of being higher than others, this haughtiness, right? So this is pride. So pride here, because you have that sense of superiority, what happens is puffs up your mind, right? So you are exaggerated. Your mind is puffed up. You think that you are really somebody. Even though you haven't done study, you actually think, oh, I have studied quite a lot. The problem with pride is that it does not allow good qualities to be cultivated or to be generated. And the reason for that is because when you have pride, you consider yourself to be superior, and that means you don't show respect for the gurus, for the teachers, for those who are great scholars, and so forth. And instead of showing respect towards them, you kind of antagonize them. You compete with them, and in this way, of course, your qualities you do not develop qualities. Another example that we find in the text is that in the heights of pride, there is no water. In the lows of the valleys, the water gathers. So the first part talks about pride, and it says in the heights of pride. So the height here is referring like to a very high mountain, like, because this is what you think. You think you're very high, right? So it says there's no water that gathers there. The water goes down. It doesn't stay there. And if the water doesn't stay there, it means there will be no flowers, no roots, no trees, nothing will grow there. Where does the water gather? The water gathers in a valley, something which is low. So lower down, the water gathers, and where the water gathers, there will be fields of flowers and trees and everything. So this is where the qualities will be generated, lower down, not in the heights of pride. Okay, so actually when we talk about pride, here we can identify 7 different types of pride. Okay, so we will go in the list one by one. The first one is pride, and pride gives you that sense of superiority because you're comparing yourself to someone who is lowly, right? Who is very poor perhaps or something. So you compare yourself to those who have less, and you think, I am better than them. So that is pride, number 1 in the list. Okay, the second one is called special pride. Special pride is something that you generate amongst those who are equal with you. So to begin with, we start by saying you are equal, your qualities are equal, you're at the same level. However, you have this attitude that says, yes, we're at the same level, but still I am better than them. Right? So there's something special about me. I have something more that they don't have. So the special pride. Number 3 is called pride beyond pride. So now you are comparing yourself to those who are really like the top of their field, right? Exceptional individuals, not your equals, exceptional individuals. And you still think, yes, but I'm better than them as well. So that's pride beyond pride. Number 4 is the pride thinking me. So this actually is pride that we generate by focusing on our appropriated, contaminated aggregates. And once we are looking at our own aggregates, we have this sense of being someone really important. So you think, whoa, me, I'm important. Number 5 is confused pride. Confused pride is because although you have not developed special powers, special qualities, you don't have those things, but in your mind, you think you are excelling, you think that you have. So you think, oh, I have achieved the concentration of the higher realm, I have achieved, special powers, I have powers and so forth. In reality, you don't have those things. We come to number 6, that is called slightly lesser pride. So that's very interesting because the texts count this as pride, whilst usually in everyday life, we don't count this as pride. So in this case, you compare yourself with those who have, let's say they have a bit better intelligence than you, they have studied a bit more than you, and you sort of like back off and you say, oh, they're better than me. I don't have such qualifications. I don't have this much education. I will not be able to stand amongst these people. All right. So it's interesting because the texts classify this as pride. Usually we would not count this as pride. It is counted as pride because the main function, if you want, of pride is that it stops us from generating any qualities. And here what you're doing is you're comparing yourself with those who are, have better intelligence, better education, and so forth, and you become depressed. Right? You just think, oh, I'm useless, or I won't be able to do anything. So again, that becomes something that stops you from generating any qualities. So remember that thing, in the heights, no water gathers, right? So no qualities. Find what is causing qualities not to be generated. So number 7, the last one is wrong pride. Wrong pride is when you consider something which is a loss, but you consider it to be the attainment of a good quality, and you're very proud about it. So, for example, you might have a certain status, and you lose that status, you lose that position, but in your mind, you think, oh, that's a good thing that happened. That's a good quality, and that's a reason to generate pride. Or, for example, you have education, you lose your study, you lose your education. That's a bad thing, right? But in your mind, you take it completely the wrong way and you think it is a good quality, and then you generate pride on the basis of this. So this is a big mistake here. Okay, so let's see the function of pride. We can identify 3 functions. First of all, due to your pride, you do not have respect for qualities or those who have qualities. Number 2, due to your pride, you will not newly generate any realizations in terms of the transmitted and the realized Dharma. And number 3, in the future, it will lead you into a bad migration. So all of this is due to pride. So with pride, we say that it leads you into lower migrations, but you might get lucky and you might be reborn as a human. It is rare, but it might happen. But even if you're born as a human, you will be born in a lower caste. You will be born as a slave, as a servant, as someone who lacks authority, power, self-determination. You will not have wealth and so forth. Okay, so let's see the next one. The next one is ignorance, number 4. So ignorance is described as not cognizing or not seeing what is afflictive and not knowing subtle objects of knowledge and not apprehending. Okay, so here when we talk about ignorance, we talk about the opposite of being able to see, the opposite of knowing. So not seeing, not knowing, this is what ignorance is. So what is it that we don't see? What are we blind to? We do not see the reality or the actual way in which phenomena exist. So that is one very important blind spot, isn't it? We don't see how phenomena really exist. And it is due to this that we cycle within samsara. So that is one thing we don't see. Another thing we don't see is the presentation of the law of cause and effect. So in other words, we cannot see, if I do this action, this type of result will come. So we are ignorant. we are confused in terms of these two things, how phenomena exist and the law of cause and effect. Okay, so if we want to look at the classification of ignorance, we can say it's a twofold classification. Ignorance in terms of the mode of abidance or the mode of existence of phenomena, and ignorance in terms of the law of cause and effect. Ignorance in terms of the law of cause and effect causes us to accumulate negative karma, and that negative karma, of course, is going to lead us into lower migrations. So it leads you into bad rebirth. If you were to come to understand how the law of cause and effect works, you will not be accumulating that much negative karma. So you will not be ending up in this type of lower rebirths. Okay, so the second type, which is ignorance in terms of the way that of reality, of how phenomena really exist, it makes us accumulate type of karma that gives us fortunate migrations within cyclic existence. So it still keeps us rotating in cyclic existence, but this time in good migrations. The thing with ignorance is that ignorance brings along doubt, and also it invites other afflictions. Once afflictions become present, we will begin accumulating karma. It's all negative karma due to afflictions. And then due to the accumulation of this karma, we will end up in the lower migrations and in samsara. So then the result of this will be to experience continuous suffering. Yeah. Okay, so we come to the next one, the fifth one, which is called doubt. Actually, it is afflicted doubt. So afflicted doubt is, it's a state of indecision where you are between two minds. You are in two minds regarding the focal object. So the focal object is here the Four Noble Truths, or the existence of the three jewels, or the law of cause and effect, and so forth. Okay, so you can see here that we are talking about afflicted doubt, which is not the doubt in general. So general, let's say they can be harmless doubt, like I'm not sure how many vases I have, or do you have a vase? Is there a vase there or not? I mean, it's not so important if you have doubt about the vase, how many vases or where is the vase and so forth. Okay. But if you have doubt in terms of the Four Noble Truths, and you think, I'm not sure, do those things exist? Are those things important? I'm not sure, probably they're not. Then this is going to stop you studying the Four Noble Truths, right? Which is a great loss. If you have doubt about the existence of the three jewels, and you say, do they exist, those things? Do they exist? Probably they don't exist. So here you're deprecating, meaning you're negating the existence of something that exists. What about the law of cause and effect? I'm not sure. Does it exist, non-exist? Does it operate? Probably not. Again, you're deprecating the law of cause and effect. So you can see that by doing this, you will not engage in study. Due to deprecating the three jewels, the law of cause and effect, you will accumulate negative karma. This will make you unhappy. This will lead you into the lower migrations. And because it functions in this way, it is classified as an affliction. So we talk about afflicted doubt. So the thing is that if you have doubt in terms of the existence of the three jewels or the law of cause and effect, this actually stops you from reaching the state of liberation. You will not reach liberation in this way. And this is why this type of doubt is described as stealing away the life out of liberation. And that expression means it is something that is blocking you from reaching liberation. So the important thing for us to come to study and look at the presentation of the Four Noble Truths. What are the Four Noble Truths? What is included here in this presentation? Or what are the three jewels? How they exist? Why they exist? What sort of qualities they have? How do they posit them? And so forth. or law of cause and effect, what acts as the cause of what brings what result, and so forth. Coming to study and understand this presentation helps us to cut off doubt. And once you cut off the doubt, it means you will enter these types of paths. And once you enter this type of path, it means you will have an understanding of what is to be practiced and what is to be abandoned. So if you start progressing in this way, you have every hope of reaching liberation. Otherwise, if you remain in the state of doubt, there's no hope of reaching liberation. Okay, so the next one, number 6, is afflicted view. Actually, in terms of afflicted view, it's not just one, but we have 5 of them. The first one is the view of the perishable composite. The second one is extreme view. The third one is clinging to the views as supreme. The fourth one is clinging to rules and rituals as supreme. And the fifth one is the wrong view. Okay, so let's look at the first one, the view of the perishable composite. The view of the perishable composite focuses on the perishable aggregates, right? So our contaminated, appropriated aggregates, they are perishable. So we're focusing on I or mine, and we think that it is established from its own characteristics. I am established from my own characteristics. Mine is established from its own characteristics. So this is the view of the perishable. So here we talk about the view of the perishable composite, and it is a view. Obviously, it has a particular type of grasping. It's apprehending I, right? So it's important to see how that I is apprehended by that particular view. So, for example, in a situation where you feel threatened, so let's say someone has harmed you and you think, oh, this person harmed me. I haven't done anything, but they harmed me, right? So at this point, you have a sense of I that seems to be unrelated and not depending upon any of the collection of the aggregates. Right? So you're thinking, they called me a thief, whilst I'm not a thief, right? So when at that point, you have this sense of I, and that sense of I appears to be something which is unrelated, independent of the aggregates, something which is autonomous, right? It has its own power, almost, the thing that we say, it is truly established from its own characteristics. So this is that notion of I is the view of the perishable. Yeah. So this is actually the self-grasping, the grasping of the I that we usually talk about, which is this idea that the I exists without relying at all on any aggregates. So to give you an idea, a good example of this, so imagine that you are walking, you're out trekking, and let's say you have to cross a point that like you have a cliff to your right, you have a cliff to your left, and there's hardly any space to place your feet. And you have to walk through that very dangerous path. And if you put one step wrong, you will fall, right? Or it could be a bridge that is about, disintegrating or anything like this. So as you're walking there, you are actually quite afraid. And at this point, you have the thought, I will fall, I will fall. You're not thinking, my body will fall. You're not thinking, my mind will fall. You're not thinking, my leg will fall, right? You are thinking, I will fall. So at this point, you have this idea of the I of yourself that is not dependent, that does not rely at all on the aggregates. So this is the grasping at the self, a self that it is unrelated to the aggregates, right? So this is what we have to identify. What is this self-grasping? Where does it come from? Okay, so this exactly is this view of the perishable composite. So first of all, let's ask ourselves the question, does this I that we conceive at that moment when we think I will fall, does that I exist or not? Without, and that is the I that does not rely or depend upon the aggregates, right? Unrelated, totally unrelated to the aggregates. So does that I exist or not? It does not exist. And then you can see how actually we have this I that does not exist has become the focus of so much preoccupation, because we consider this I to be very important, to be very precious. And we do a lot of things about this very important self, this very important I. But in reality, that thing does not exist at all. So at that point, we grasp very strongly at me, I, right? And this me or I appears or is apprehended to be established from its own characteristics, established without relying on anything else, established from its own side, from its own power, 100% from its own power, without depending or relying on anything. So this is exactly the opposite from the idea of existing by relying on others, by depending on others, existing by being imputed, right? So it is quite the opposite. The I that exists without depending, without relying, from its own characteristic, truly established with an essence or a self. Okay, there's no point in us grasping at this. We say again and again that what we need to realize is selflessness, emptiness. So in other words, to negate the idea of a self, that is, of something that is established from its own self, independently, without relying on anything else, having the whole power on its own side. Okay, so this is exactly what we negate when we talk about selflessness. So it's we have this idea that we have a self that does not rely upon the aggregates at all. But this could not be further from the truth. When we talk about the person is imputed upon any of the aggregates, and in particular, the gross aggregate of form, our body, right? Without having this, we cannot impute the person in our case. However, we think that there is a person, there is me, that exists without relying on the aggregates at all. And to give you an example why that indicates that we have that belief, if anyone were to ask you, would you like to exchange your bad negative mind with the fully omniscient mind of Manjushri, right? And we would say, yes, I would exchange. I want to change, right? Exchange. But actually you can't, because you are imputed upon your own aggregates. You do not exist without depending, without relying upon the aggregates. But in our minds, we think that we exist without depending, without relying on the aggregates. We're totally unrelated. So you can see that the way that we grasp it to exist, it doesn't actually exist in this way. So this is exactly the object of negation. When we talk about the object of negation, is to identify what is it that we have misapprehended, that we think it exists, but in reality it doesn't exist. So we need to negate that that thing exists, isn't it? So it does not exist the way that it is grasped. And once you understand this, then you will develop an understanding of emptiness. So emptiness is the subtle, we always refer to it as the subtle meaning of emptiness. It's not very easy, it's not easy to understand at all, right? So emptiness does not refer to the absence of the vase or the absence of the house, the emptiness of the vase, the emptiness of the house. It doesn't mean you don't have a vase. It doesn't mean you don't have a house, right? Emptiness of the vase, you have to understand the object of negation. You are negating that that the object exists in the way that you were grasping at it to exist. All right. So Geshe says it's up to each one of you to investigate this, the meaning of emptiness. It is a very difficult subject. It's very profound. Geshe says difficult for me to explain, difficult for you to comprehend in this class, and we run out of time. So we will stop here tonight.